I could have picked anything for the next episode. The Incredibles, Despicable Me, Monsters Inc. And out of everything, I picked the movies from the Fireman Sam reboot. God, I hate myself. Whether you love it or hate it, I'm guessing the latter is most of you, this reboot of Fireman Sam has been the driving force of the show for well over a decade now. And in that time, it's spawned 5 movies, which are just as bad, if not worse, than Season 6 onwards. So, let's have a look at all these movies and see if I feel like setting my room on fire after watching them all. I just want to get this out of the way now. Let's just start this off by saying, when I was around 4 to 6 years old, I was in love with Fireman Sam. I mean, Thomas and Bob the Builder are also key shows that made up my childhood, but they don't stand out at all compared to how attached to Fireman Sam I was. I would always be tuning in to watch the episodes from seasons 6, 7, 5, and occasionally the original series on Cartoonito at any opportunity I got. And whenever the Great Fire of Pontypandy aired, it always felt like a real treat. Although, as time passed, I slowly started to lose interest in catching up with the new Fireman Sam material. Even when I saw a TV spot for Heroes of the Storm, I wasn't really as hyped as I would have been as a 4-year-old. My mind was set on watching some other movies that year. And after viewing James A. Williams' divisive CGI Fireman Sam video, it was safe to say my expectations for Set for Action were rather low. I did see the opening of the movie when a full version was uploaded onto YouTube some time back, but other than that, I didn't really get to see it that much. And that actually reminds me of something. I eventually found out that, according to a comment I saw a while ago, Set for Action was the final Fireman Sam production, as confirmed by the head writer. While I was gutted to hear this, I was glad that Mattel were moving away from Fireman Sam to work on other things. Wait a minute! Norman Price and the Mystery in the Sky, released in 2020.
So that was a fucking lie.
Well, I guess that gives me something extra to talk about. Now for this instalment, I'm going to be a bit more critical than usual. Since I've been very familiar with CGI Fireman Sam for as long as I can remember, and now that I'm looking back on the movies with fresh eyes, I'm going to see if these movies really have deserved the abuse they've gained over the years. As always, I have rewatched all of these movies in preparation for this video, and this will be based around my opinion and nobody else's. This was the Fireman Sam movie I have the most memories of watching, so you'd think I'd enjoy it on my rewatch. Big shock, you're wrong. So let's address the new character this movie introduces. Just like the Thomas movie video, I'm not addressing all the characters, because I think we all know who characters like Sam, Trevor, Norman and Station Officer Steele are. The only new character this movie introduces is Chief Fire Officer Boyce. And you know, I think he works fine as a movie exclusive. It would have been a trait unique to Boyce, but no, let's just crumple that up and use him in an episode of Season 8. So let's address the story. You know how Norman was such an arsonist in the CGI series of Fireman Sam? Well, this movie is one of the best examples of that, when he starts the Great Fire of Pontypandy, which is nowhere near Pontypandy in the first place. And of course it culminates in Station Officer Steele reprimanding Norman in the end.
I live in Smethwick, Birmingham. If you want the fucking brawl, come down to Smethwick Hospitality. I'll come out of my house and I'll break your fucking legs. Come Birmingham and I'll fuck you up. Come
I suppose the only thing I found passable was the Mike in the Lighthouse gag in the middle section. That made me crack a smile at least, but that's about as far as it gets good. The rest of the movie is just boring, reliant on disregarding the original series, but that's typical of the reboot, and questionable. Like, why is Jupiter being used to go to the harbour to launch Neptune? Last I checked, it was always Venus. I also have to deduct points for wherever there's a scene in Station Officer Steele's office. My attention is only drawn to the photo from the glory days of the show. You know, for a movie I adored as a younger child, having rewatched this movie recently, it was certainly better back then. And going into my rewatch, I honestly wanted it to feel like it was that good. But alas, it's not. So this is the first Fireman Sam movie made by our favourite scam call centre, Mattel. And, oh my god, it definitely shows. Let's just address the two new characters, Arnold and Ellie. And no, not the same and obviously better Ellie we looked at last month. Anyways, I actually kinda liked Arnold. Not because he shares Thomas's voice, but because of his dynamic with Elvis. I liked how after he got himself into trouble and Elvis rescued him, Arnold saw Elvis as not a bad fireman. I quite like that. Ellie, on the other hand, isn't really that interesting as a character, and only serves as adding another female firefighter to the show. So now for the story. After the construction of the most ridiculous addition to the show, a hurricane hits Pontypandy, and it's up to the fire service to help the community and save the new fire station. Speaking of the new fire station, what the fuck? This is just counterproductive to this show's identity. Why does Pontypandy need a bigger fire station? Why couldn't they just refurbish the old one? Again. This is not only an insult to the first 5 seasons of Fireman Sam, but as someone who's grown up with CGI Fireman Sam in its earliest stages, this is just heartbreaking to me. Not to mention the final climax ranges from boring to infuriating. Like, oh no, there's a fire in the fire station's yard.
Fire at the fire station.
And there just so happens to be some gas canisters right there. Okay, just stop. Does anyone want to try and explain why the rain can't put out this fire? Last I checked, it tackled the Great Fire of Pontypandy without issue. A hurricane can't put out a tiny blaze like this? Come on. And why are they fighting the fire with just a hose and an extinguisher? Venus has a cannon on top of her tank for a reason. If I went over every other issue with this scene, we would be here for absolute ages. I'd say this is worse than the Great Fire of Pontypandy. No, the worst of the franchise. At least Great Fire had something I smiled at, and the rain could actually put out the fire. Here, this is all just major stupidity. I'm not coming back to this one. Now time to talk about the Fireman Sam movies I haven't really viewed that much at all. And honestly, when I rewatched this one, I just thought, what the fuck was that? So this movie's new character is Buck Douglas. He's basically every single popular TV show host in various movies and TV shows. And the big reveal of him being the alien was just too anticlimactic, I'm sorry. So this movie's story is, when there are multiple UFO sightings around Pontypandy, Norman and his friends try to get to the bottom of it, and end up causing emergencies in the process. Doesn't that sound like one of the most predictable stories you've ever heard of? In terms of likes and dislikes, there's— oh, for God's sake, now they've changed the Mountain Rescue Centre for no reason? Why are they writing things that weren't even wrong? Also, I'm gonna have a hard time believing Venus can be lifted up and transported to Pontypandy Island. Why is Venus even going there in the first place? Why not— oh, I don't know— fucking Titan! They clearly used her in the final climax, so why take Venus as well? I may have glossed over this movie a lot, but there just isn't that much to talk about with this one. What is making Mattel think that these kinds of premises are acceptable? This was the movie I feared most was going to be the worst. Until my rewatch, I thought Heroes of the Storm was the worst. And Set for Action is better than the previous two, but worse than Great Fire. So in this movie, there are two new main characters. Fancy that! There's a new character introduction pattern regarding these movies. So to start, there's Don Sledgehammer. Don't even think about referencing the amazing Peter Gabriel song that shares his surname. One time was enough. He's basically your typical movie director and that's it. Although Kerry Shale did sound like he was having a fun time voicing him. Then there's Flex Dexter. The literal only significant thing about him is that he's voiced by John Barrowman. I've never heard of him, other than a quick reference to him in You've Been Framed once. So what's this movie's story? When one of Sam's rescues becomes an internet phenomenon, Don Sledgehammer gets inspired to make a movie starring Sam, but Flex Dexter wants to be the star instead. I'm sure from that summary you can predict everything that's going to go down. I suppose the best thing about this movie was the opening credits. The song, while generic as hell, was quite catchy, and I also loved the edited Night of the Norman footage here. Now for the dislikes, and god, there are so many. Let's start with the oh come on! Now they're tinkering with Jupiter? Well, at least it didn't last forever this time. Also, did the writers watch James A. Williams' CGI Fireman Sam video during production? It definitely feels like that as Norman goes on about his annoying voice. But aside from that, this movie is sort of in the middle for me. Of course I don't like it, but it's definitely better than the previous two atrocities. As of this video's release, this is the most recent Fireman Sam movie. And I honestly don't want them to continue making Fireman Sam movies after this one. I just can't take any more. Let's start with the two new scientist characters. Man, these writers love making these characters into stereotypes, don't they? That's what these characters basically are again. Villainous scientist stereotypes. So what's this movie's story? When Joe invents his greatest invention yet, Professor Polonium and Dr. Crumpton steal it for their discount transformer, and it's up to the emergency services of Pontypandy to save the town and contain the criminals. I say emergency services because since season 12, it wasn't just the fire service. I guess the one thing I liked about this movie was when Dilys was shouting at Norman in the suit. But that's literally the only thing I saw as passable, alongside the fact that this movie gave us a sort of conclusive end to the Norman Man trope that's been going on since the start of the CGI era. Thanks a lot, Lee Pressman. You know, with all that I just went on about, all the flying robots and everything, I don't think the crew could squeeze in an unnecessary check. You fucking son of a bitch! How the hell could you massacre Venus like this? She's my favourite fire engine. I made this because of that. How fucking could you? What next? Are they going to turn Mercury into this? Oh wait, I forgot. This is Mattel we're talking about. They wouldn't care if this made them file for bankruptcy. Thank God that's over. Let's just see what I think of all these movies, shall we? The Great Fire of Pontypandy, mediocre. Heroes of the Storm, easily the worst. Alien Alert, what the fuck is this movie? Set for Action, better than the previous two, but worse than Great Fire. Norman Price in The Mystery in the Sky, the definition of a money grab. Well, we finally made it to the end of that fiesta. Honestly, it's such a shame to see such a great show churn out movies like this. I guess that can be expected from a show that's now being used as a fire safety campaign, right? I am definitely not coming back to this trash fire of a reboot. Yes, fanboys. What can you do to stop me from saying that? Oi! You can't complain, because you're not the target audience, lad. Invalid response. Although, from what I've seen from Season 13 promos, This does look like the best CGI season so far. I really think with what Season 13 is showing me, CGI Fireman Sam will eventually be as good as the first 5 seasons. Press X to doubt. Okay, I'm not coming back to this reboot if that's okay with you reboot fanboys.